The Strigoi. Having discussed the Necrarchs and their isolationist yet power seeking ways, I feel it's time to discuss the other similar yet completely different bloodline, the Strigoi. You see, while Necrarchs hide in dark caves and practice their sorcery, creating undead minions of large varieties, they always seek to rule their own kingdom of death. The Strigoi are similar in only, well, a few of these aspects. To be a Strigoi is to live in the sewers and the caves or abandoned graveyards. Not too different than the Necrarchs. The difference is a Strigoi does this to survive. For to be a Strigoi is to be persecuted by all vampire bloodlines for being nothing more than beasts. Their physical appearance is well devolved to show their true vampiric form that's lying underneath every vampire's surface. Something that fascinates the Necrarchs and terrifies the other bloodlines. For the other bloodlines, to them, this is a warning of what happens when they lose their humanity, when they become their ravenous feral beasts. While the Necrarchs, they view these as great specimens to experiment on, for which they can do flesh crafting. So how did the Strigoi come to be? How did this bloodline come? Well, it all starts with the fall of Lamia, just like all the other bloodlines. Ushan, the first Strigoi, decided that vampires should cooperate and form together, forming their strength into a council or governmental body, proudly stating themselves as vampires and establishing a nation that ruled alongside humanity. Such an idea was mocked at and shunned by all the other vampire lords, and they all scattered and left. The only ones Ushan had was the only vampires that he created, his own personal band. So together they ventured north into the desert, where they came across a city known as Mourkain. This kingdom was small and barely of note, but Ushan saw potential. So he and his ilk, his kin, entered the city and quickly established themselves as the highest governing officials of the land. By being the head of the temple and the head ministers of the government, Ushan declared himself the ruler, and the people regarded him as the undying king. The people of this land devoutly worshipped the vampire lords and were ruled justly. The vampires only fed on criminals, slaves, captured enemies of the state. Any people of the city who were loyal and possessed great merits would be granted the blood kiss to elevate themselves in status. To all the people here, life was great and things were looking better as the day went on. Mind you, they lived in the Badlands, a region known for being inhospitable to human life with constant orc attacks and other human city-states nearby. The vampires of the Strigoi protected the city and served as the arms and shields of the humans who lived here. The Strigoi had no intent on hurting anyone they ruled over, as they believed as rulers they owed the people their lives, not the other way around, like the old queen of vampires believed, Neferata. To the Strigoi, it was an honor and privilege to guide humanity and to rule them, which is what makes so noble of a faction in comparison to all the other bloodlines. Like, even Bretonnians don't view rulership this way. They view it as, I rule over you, so you owe your life over to me. Whereas the Strigoi are the opposite. They say, I rule over you, and for this privilege, my life is to you, which is a very different way of ruling. So how do we get from them being outcast in vampire society and human society? Well, the Undying King, Ushan, went out to face an enemy city-state in battle, far, far north of their territory. As he typically had done so for the past few centuries ruling, but as typical of the Greenskins, a massive wog appeared completely out of nowhere. The World Edge Mountains shook as this horde came barreling down from the mountaintops. Hearing news that his kingdom was under siege by a huge horde, the Undying King Ushan retreated to his lovely city of Mourkain. There we see Strigoi and orcs battling it out outside the city walls. Each vampire easily slaughtering tens and hundreds of orcs. But unfortunately, numbers were on the orc side. Having suffered losses, Ushan ordered a retreat into the city, hoping to mount a better defense. But in his retreat, the orc shaman and the orc warboss, who were both flying great wyverns, came flying down to guide the horde to follow the vampires into the city as the gates were still open. Ushan was in a rage to see his noble city burning to the ground. To watch his whole life's work go in flames caused him to just go into this rage where he dueled the orc warboss, the orc shaman, and two great wyverns that they were riding on. Now, according to the Vampire Codex, Ushan was close to winning this 4 versus 1 battle, but the shaman let loose incredible destructive magics that wiped Ushan from ever coming back to life. It was such a pitched battle, and unfortunately, the Undying King had died. With Ushan defeated, the Strigoi fled the city, trying desperately to survive and possibly scrounge up any human survivors that they can hopefully rebuild. But the orcs were thorough. They razed the city to the ground and kept chasing, forcing the Strigoi to now seek the other vampire bloodlines. Now, what they didn't know was that their father, Ushan, had cursed these other bloodlines, calling them scumbags for what they are. Finding the von Karsteins first in the land of Sylvania, the Strigoi pleaded for their aid and hopefully crush the orcs and rebuild. The von Karsteins found this amusing. They thought it was hilarious. They laughed at the pleas and set about killing the Strigoi fools and trapping the rest in permanent, unopening coffins to torture them. Seeing this, the Strigoi fled and were met with the same treatment by the rest of the bloodlines. The only difference would be really the Blood Knights, but, well, the Blood Dragons, they view Strigoi as a challenge, so they actually want to kill the Strigoi. It's not exactly much different. Having now exhausted their allies and still nowhere to call home, many Strigoi reside in areas I mentioned earlier. The abandoned cemeteries and sewers. Places that both vampires and humans alike would just avoid. The Strigoi still hold memories of their life in the courts of Mourkain, and as such, they try to avoid harming humans the best they can. So to sate their hungers, they feast on dead flesh, hoping to find the newly buried. They also despise giving out the blood kiss, as they wish to return to the glorious days before, where they could sire any newcomers in their ranks within the kingdom, as they now have a kingdom at their disposal to vet out who really is worthy of a blood kiss versus who is just seeking power. Having lived this lifestyle for many, many centuries, the Strigoi body started to adapt to this rough life. Slowly their mouths started to turn into gaping holes full of fangs, their backs hunched, their claws growing longer and sharper than any metal forged by man. Only price that's being paid with this body transformation is the mind of the vampire. It starts to whittle away. They become more susceptible to rage, sooner than they realize, becoming entirely bestial. Having such an appearance brings terror to the other vampires, as they start to realize just how quickly they too can lose their minds and humanity, how easy it is to succumb to this fate. Others, like the Necrarchs, view this change as worth of study, and indeed some of the greatest vampire military units are in fact bestial vampires, like Vargulfs and Vargeists, which are nothing more than just simply vampires who are starved, who are dominated, where their mind is completely gone, so the other vampires just imbibe terrible, terrible dark magics into them to ensnare whatever's left of their feral mind and turn them into military units. So with that being said, how do Strigoi armies look like? Well, Strigoi are known as ghoul kings, And the reason for that is that there's these semi-human, semi-undead creatures known as ghouls. I could do a whole video on them, but they tend to flock wherever dark magic resides. And the Strigoi will see these abominations, and they'll cast their magic, which is very blunt and primitive, to lasso the souls of the ghouls into his service, forever trapping them as members of his own dark court. To a Strigoi, their minds still reminisce the days of old, so it's not uncommon to find a Strigoi crypt full of ghouls who are standing in some awkward salute or marching like an army would. For the Strigoi still cling to their noble nature despite their physical appearance. Some Strigoi hope to create a big enough army that they can march on their own and retake Mourkain. Others simply wish to make the other vampires and orcs pay for their actions against them. This is why in Warhammer 3 I find it so odd to see Strigoi as a recruitable lord, because they are basically the anti-vampires of the anti-vampires. They seek nothing more than the revenge of their kind. Despite the riddling insanity the Strigoi face, they're still adept magic casters. Only issue is that they are crude and primitive in their applications. For example, a good example would be a necromancer. A necromancer might summon a skeleton by pulling on the old soul that once inhabited the body. Thereby, the skeleton will assume the shape of its old original form. A Strigoi will not do that. A Strigoi will instead use his magic to grab the bones and mash them into a somewhat human shape with pure magic just blasting into the bones, causing this disheveled, shaking construct that looks like a skeleton. But if you look hard enough, you can note that there's a few out-of-place body parts. So when a Strigoi goes to war, what does it look like? Well, Strigoi tend to be followed by the undead due to their power. So armies tend to be the Strigoi in the front leading his undead army. And gameplay wise, this pretty much suits them fine, as they're absolute beasts in combat and can cast dark magic to suck the life out of whoever they're fighting. Only issues Strigoi have is pretty much the same as orcs, funny enough. Their own hated foes. Which is that the army of the Strigoi will probably start crumbling around them, but because the Strigoi is so hellbent on his own personal actions, they may not see, or they may just fail to see that they're starting to get surrounded. To be a Strigoi is to be a vampire who pursues nobility to truly give the best life for your subjects and become a whirlwind to the foes who would harm your kingdom. Unfortunately, they are deformed and insanity-ridden, where every century that passes, more and more Strigoi are lost to their affliction, devolving further into monsters. Out of all the bloodlines, they're the most tragic, as they wish only for cooperation and aid, which has only been met so far with fire and brimstone. In fact, that could be a very interesting campaign you can play with your friends. Be vampire hunters in search of a lost party of the sewers, only to discover a ghoul king. And as you barely manage to slay the beasts, you realize that there is no lost party of adventurers down here. And the person who hired you may have been a thrall of a Lamian or a von Karstein vampire who just simply wanted to kill the Strigoi. This could lead to a whole adventure where your party seeks to atone for accidentally killing such a noble beast. Or your party is just simply fanatics as hell and says, you know what, there's more vampires that need killing. Besides that, this has been Freezer 700. I hope you all enjoyed, and please check out the other lore we have done on this channel, as I always cover obscure topics that will pretty much knock the socks out of anybody who enjoys the lore of a setting. Like, if someone talks about the Thousand Suns, they'll be like, oh yeah, man, I love Thousand Suns. They're so cool. Their Egyptian aesthetic. It's so cool the way Ahriman and Magnus. And then you just simply come out of nowhere and say, yeah, man, I love their tutelleries. Huh? What's a tutellery? You don't subscribe to Freezer 700. He talks about that. See, I give you guys that insider knowledge. So besides that, see you guys next time.